Hi there, it's Linda from Lányos Handmade, and today I'm going to show you a few Tessa bags. The Tessa bag started out as a pattern that was a simple bag with not too many features. I had two sizes and I had a pocket on the front. And then I figured it was time for an upgrade, although these are good ones too. I do like these ones. I decided to add in a few features. I also made them out of repurposed denim jeans. So that's another option you could think about when you're making yours. I went a little wild and added some extras on. And I pieced together all the denim to make the fronts and backs of them. Then I decided it was time for an upgrade. I still like the two sizes that we can have. And the pocket, this one has a pocket in the front and the back. And it has a zipper, it's probably hard to see, but it has a zipper pocket inside and card slots and a slip pocket. I didn't make a handle because I had this really cool hardware. Ooh, I had this really cool hardware for it, so I used that. Just a tip, if your swivel hook doesn't fit on your D-ring, you can always use a gate. What is this called? Gate ring? Yeah, you can always use a gate ring between the two to make it attach properly. So that was one option. This is another cell phone one I made that only has inside card slot pockets. But again, it has the two pockets in the front and the back. And an adjustable strap. Now the adjustable strap and, making this one, this is totally all in the pattern. So you could follow the pattern to make one for yourself. This one here was all fabric and it's just got the zipper pocket inside and one pocket on the front, adjustable strap. This one here I made with cork, and this is the hardware heavy strap. And here's another hardware heavy strap, except this one has webbing on it instead of all cork. Inside there are three pocket options: card slot, slip pocket, and a zipper pocket. And then on the outside we have the overlay zipper pocket and the slip pocket with a snap on it. And this one here, I think this is pretty similar because it's got the magnetic snap pocket in the front and the slip pocket. Oh, this one doesn't have card slots because I put an espresso wallet inside, but it does have a zipper pocket and the overlay pocket on it. So you'll see from this pattern, you can make it two sizes. You can make it be rounded corners or not. You can make it with any choice of 5 pocket styles. And any of these pockets could be put on the inside or the outside. It's your choice. So this pattern, even though you're buying one pattern, I can't even count the number of different versions that I've seen. So there's a choice of 5 straps in the pattern and one more on the video. This one is on the video. There's a choice of 5 pockets to choose from, and there's a choice of 2 sizes. So I can't even do the math to figure out what that gives you. So that's all the features, and you can decide what you'd like to use. This bag is good for markets because you can make it simple and quick. It's good for beginners because you can start with a simple, bag and build up from that to the more difficult things like maybe card slots or the overlay pocket. Make it with fabric, you can make it with cork, you can make it with vinyl. I do have a vinyl one floating around here somewhere. Where did I put it? Oh, it's in the other room. So I've made it with vinyl too. I made every single one of them with a domestic sewing machine, Janome Memory Craft 8200. And for special feet, I used a walking foot sometimes for the vinyl. I used a stitch in the ditch foot to get really close on the straps. This one here was done with a 1/4 inch foot, so it's a little bit farther away from the strap edge, but it really helps guide you as you're sewing. In the video, I put in timestamps so that you can jump to the section that you want to have. So maybe you're just making a simple bag and you want to go from the simple bag to the strap and not do any of the pockets between. You'll see the timestamps and they'll show you what you can do. And the other thing I did with the hardware heavy one is for adjusting the strap, because sometimes some people want a longer strap than this. It's probably best to add your length in on this section, not on this section. But that's your choice, obviously, but it's just that's where the slider is, so it would probably be easier if you wanted to add 5 inches or 10 inches to add it in here. And I apologize for my fuzzy voice in the video there. I kind of seem to have gotten a cold when I was filming this, so I tried not to be too irritating. Anyway, let's start sewing. So let's start with some basic pieces. We need a front and a back, and we need our lining for our front and our back. We'll need a zipper at the top to close it, and a zipper pull. Or else if you have a ready-made zipper, you can use that. When you're using ready-made zippers, zipper tape is usually wider than the tape here, so it's easier to use. So sometimes when you buy ready-made zippers, they don't have as wide of a tape and they're a bit more difficult to sew in. We will talk more about zippers when we get to that. The other thing we need is some D-rings, and we can make the D-ring tabs with some strips like this. And the other thing we need is some zipper tabs, so we'll use strips like this too. The zipper tabs on the tablet size one will need 2, but on the cell size one we'll only need 1, because we're going to try and make as wide of a mouth as we can in the cell-sized one. The D-ring tabs are then attached to a strap, and the strap has a strap end on it that's included, and these will be the D-rings that I attach onto here. I've never used these before. They're pretty cool. They sure snap shut well, so they'll attach on. Now, if you're not making this kind of a strap, you can make an adjustable strap with fabric or cork or, you know, vinyl, leather. You can make a hardware heavy, like I call it, strap. That's another option. And that one, we'd need our D-rings. And we need our swivel hooks. Then we're going to have a length of, you know, fabric, leather, vinyl. We're going to have a pretty divider, and then we're going to have another length. So you have to decide before you cut, and I obviously haven't decided yet because I haven't cut it yet. You have to decide what kind of strap you want. So the basics are the front and the back, zipper tabs, zipper pull, D-ring tabs. There's your D-rings and your swivel hooks. And you can get away with making a nice bag with that. So you can have, for another option, a magnetic snap pocket. I've got one cut here. You can have 2, one on the front, one on the back. And I've got snaps for those. I've never tried to put one inside, but you could even put one inside if you wanted to. It's up to you, because you get to choose how many times you cut this out and how many of them you're going to make. I have cut this out and put it on my cell phone sized. So this one is tablet sized. You can make a magnetic snap pocket for your cell phone size, but I don't always put the snap on it either, because sometimes it's small enough you just slide it in. Now another option is to have a slip pocket. You can put the slip pocket on the outside, you can put it on the inside, you can put it on front, back, whatever you like. So that's the next thing we need, is a slip pocket. Now the next thing we can put on is a zipper pocket. And that too you can put on the outside or the inside. So I've only cut out one of each of these, but if you cut out two, you can put one on the front, one on the back. You'll need more zipper and more pulls. And the last thing we have is there's an overlay zipper pocket. And that one needs some zippers again and another pull. And this is going to be my zipper overlay. And I cut out things with the fabric cutting table, so I end up with squares all the time around the corners. But there are pieces for everything in the pattern that you can make your zipper overlay a nice rounded piece without, you know, thinking too hard about it. You just cut it out. And so I think that's the options. Oh, and there's a card slot pocket too, which I haven't cut out yet, but there's going to be some ironing and folding for that one. So I'll show you how to do that in detail over at the iron. So first off, everybody needs D-ring tabs. And it doesn't really matter what you use because most of it's going to be hidden inside the seam of your bag. Only a bit's going to be sticking out. I like putting just a little bit of, let's see if I can squish this out, just a little bit here to hold it. I could use double-sided tape too to hold it down, but I like to use a little bit of ribbon to hold it tight here. I don't want to sew on anything. You can use, you know, some heavyweight interfacing tube, Deauville or Peltex or something. Just something to keep it reinforced just a little bit. And then we're going to slide these on. And clip them down. And I'm just going to sew them as high as I can so that they stay. It doesn't wobble around too much. I don't want to sew any more than, we've got a 1/2 inch seam allowance in our bag. And I'm going to try and get this as close in to the seam as I can. So I probably won't sew where the clips are, but I will sew under the clips. I want to keep some room. So I'll sew that so it doesn't slip. And I'll do the other one too. If you have fabric for your D-ring tabs, it'll be cut wider. And that's because you want to fold the edges over so that there's no raw edge for the fabric. But the instructions are in the pattern for that, so that's no problem. So I'm just going to clip these and sew them, and we will be right back. So we've done our D-ring tabs. Let's do our zipper tabs now. I have zipper tape, so I have to put the zipper pull on. And we shall see if I'm lucky or not. If it doesn't work on one end, stick it on the other end. Try it on the other end. There. And don't worry if it's a little bit uneven here. That even makes it easier to put on if you have one side a little bit longer than the other side. And I've measured out how much I need. With zipper tape, you always need a certain amount of zipper tape. The actual teeth is what goes in the zipper box or in the top of your bag. Then you need extra just to help you work it. So I am going to put the zipper tabs on this one. Since it's for my tablet, I need 2. And if I'm going to put the tabs on, now it has to be evened out nicely. There. And I think I'm even going to zigzag the end of it a little bit so it doesn't flop around too much. And put a zipper tab on. Now, like I was talking about measurements, this is where the zipper tab is going to be. The measurement I need is whatever's called for in the pattern. It has to be between the 2 zipper tabs. So you have to measure after you get the first one on. Measure, make sure you have enough whatever this length is of teeth, that's how many teeth you need in the pattern too. If I have a cell size bag I'm making, I would put my zipper tab on this end. And then I would measure how much exposed teeth I need. For the cell size bag, it's not too much. So I'm going to pull this back a bit. And just so the zipper tape gets used to it, I would stick a little clip in here so that it gets used to this is the way the life is going to be. It's going to be with you with a bend in the middle of it. Now, make sure you measure and get the right amount of teeth. I'm just going to have that sit until I need it, okay? Of course, I'm going to put this on first. So, how do we put this on? Well, if we're using a raw edge material, it's easy. I'm just going to use some double-sided tape here. You can use glue or anything you like. I do not like this brand that I ended up getting, so I bought another one because this brand is kind of fussy. So if you need a 1/2 inch line here, get yourself a 1/2 inch line. It will help you. There, I drew a 1/2 inch line in there. So now I know to put this up as far as the 1/2 inch line. It's in the center. Press it over, line it up nicely, and we'll clip it. And then we'll sew it. But we're not going to sew on the zipper teeth. You don't want to wreck your machine or jam it up or anything. So now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew it down right across here. And that will be the zipper tab on one end. And later we're going to sew these bends in as we're putting the zipper in. Now, if we were doing a fabric zipper tab, again, you make sure this is even on the end. I like zigzagging it on the end so that it stays. And then after, we're going to put this together like this and sew across. It doesn't matter whether you start from the bottom or the top, the end result is going to be the same because we roll it around a 1/2 inch and this a 1/2 inch. It helps if you even press those in with your iron and fold it over a 1/2 inch, and then everything's all enclosed, and then you can sew it down. And that works too if you're using fabric. So there, I've got my zipper tabs on, and measure this space and make sure it's the amount of zipper teeth that you need. It's okay if it's a bit smaller, but it can't be bigger because then you're going to run out of, you have to have seam allowance here too. Okay, so that piece is done. Next, this is an optional thing to do, is a zipper pocket. You can put them on the outside, you can put them on the inside, whatever you like. My black fabric was so dark I couldn't draw a line on it, but that's okay because I drew a line here marking my zipper box, and this is where we're going to sew anyway, is this box. I've just measured around and made it correct around here with my ruler. There's no way I could get lines to show up on this black fabric. So I'm going to sew around my box now here, and then we'll cut it open. So now we've sewed around. It might be difficult for you to see the lines because my thread is white. The only time you have to be really super careful is when you're cutting into those corners. And some people only sew this row and this row. They don't sew the ends. They just leave the fold between these two lines of stitching as their point where they push it in and press it. But I like to do it around. I also like to iron this way and iron this way and these sides just to get a nice smooth crease in them. And then after I push it through and press it. So I'm going to go over the iron now and take care of that. And I'll come back and show you what it looks like. Now I've pressed this nicely on both sides, and I can place this underneath the opening. I've got double-sided tape on here. This is the brand I'm not too fond of, so it's not easy to put on. And I'm going to line this up nicely here. Make sure the top and the bottom are equal here, and that looks good. I've got some whitish thread I'm going to be sewing it down with, but that's okay. It won't look too bad. But I'll sew that down in there. I'll move the zipper pull as I sew. And if you look at the other side, you'll be able to see the sewing come through here, and that's just perfectly fine. Oh, and I put the little zipper stops at the end here. So I guess that's it. I'll sew this down and I'll bring it back and show it to you. So there's our zipper sewn in. Of course, it's not a pocket yet because we have to sew the back on. I took the time to put my label on too. So on the back, I'm going to get rid of this because I don't like any overhang. Little threads. This doesn't hang over here, so that's okay. Next, we match this up and pin it. And we can sew around it. I usually sew and zigzag. You can even press the bottom first if you want to make sure it's nice and flat and smooth when you're sewing it. If you press this, then it stays nice and smooth. And I should pin the top too. So now we're going to sew just this here, and our pocket will then be shut. Now, I like putting it this way and sewing it this way. So every time I do this, my pins are facing the wrong way. But that's the way I like to do it. Some people like to pin this out of the way so they can actually see what they're sewing. So you might want to do that too. So I'm going to sew it, and then I'm going to press it. And then after, we can move on to our next optional pocket. This one now can go on the front or the back. It could even go on the outside if you wanted. If you wanted to make a fabric outside, you could use this kind of a pocket on the outside too. So there's lots of options for this pattern. So there we have it finished. I zigzagged and sewed and pressed. And as you can see, it's a real pocket now. Now the next pocket we're going to do is a slip pocket. This pocket with the zipper is only for the tablet size because this zipper is long, and if we were going to put one in the tablet or in the cell phone size, the zipper would have to be so short it would be pretty much pointless. So the zipper pocket only goes in the tablet sized one. Now the slip pocket that we're going to do can go in the tablet sized one or the cell phone sized one. There are measurements in the pattern for how big to make the piece if you're using a cell phone sized piece. Now for this one, we're going to sew wrong sides together just to here. I want to leave an opening so I can turn this. So just sew around here, and then we'll come back and turn it. And there we go. I'm going to turn it, and when I turn it, then I'm going to go press it, and when I press it down, I'm going to press this down too because I want to have my 1/2 inch seam allowance be very noticeable here. So let's turn this first. And when you're running this along, don't just poke it in the corners, but run it along the actual seam that you sewed, and it'll help the corners come out even quicker. Okay, so go press it, and then we can sew it onto, well, you can sew it onto anything, the front, the back, anywhere. because it's your choice where you want to put these things. Okay, I've made my slip pocket, and I decided to take my label off there and put it on here so I could have my slip pocket up higher. I've got 5 options for pockets, so and there's only 4 pieces to put them on, so you have to double up. If you want all of them, you have to double up something. So I decided to double up the slip pocket and the zipper pocket. So I'm going to sew around here, and I might even measure out, get my fake phone out and put it here and measure where I can sew another row, even if it goes over my logo, or maybe it won't. Maybe I need lots of space. Maybe it goes beside. But I'll measure it out after I sew this down. When you're sewing this down, make sure you don't sew your zipper pocket into there. Otherwise, it renders it useless. So I'm just going to pin that up there to help me remember. Now I can make sure I'm only sewing the pocket down. So there's my slip pocket finished. My pretend phone fits in it. And if I had a pen or something, I could stick that in too. This still works because when I was sewing the slip pocket, I pinned it up. So now I can move on to the next pocket. So keep in mind the zipper pocket is only for the tablet size. The slip pocket has a big size and a little size, so it fits in the tablet size and the cell phone sized Tessa bag. Next pieces, we've got the magnetic snap pocket. We've got to make this first, and then we'll stick it on the front or the back, whichever you like, or you could even put it on the inside if you like. But we'll make it and put it on. So I'm going to line up the edge and just sew it with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then after we'll stick the snap on the inside. Some people like sticking the snap on before they sew it up, but I usually do it this way. So I'll sew this seam up, and then I'll come back and show you how to put the snap on. Now I sew these 2 pieces together, and I edge stitched. If you don't want a magnetic snap on here, then now you can line it up with the bottom and the sides and sew it on, just baste it onto here, and you'll be done. If you do want a magnetic snap, then you have to measure where you're going to put it. And I've got the holes poked in already, so I'm just going to try and poke this through. Can't see the holes from the other side, it's so black. Oh, there it is. So that's poked through. Now I can put this on. And I see it overhangs a bit. I'm going to cut it down a bit because I don't want it interfering with the fold. And then I can put the washer on. I'm going to press these down. I'm going to go over and hammer them because I like to. And put some tape on top of it. And don't sew it on yet because we are going to put the next one on this side. So the 2 meet. Now besides doing your measurements to find out where the other half goes, try a few times. Make sure that it actually hits the right spot, because with the seam allowances and cutting and, you know, a little bit here and there, a 1/4 inch one way or the other could add up to 1/2 inch. But that's pretty much on where my marks are. So, you know, give it a shot. Try it a few times. See if it works. And then after, we'll take our little seam ripper and put some holes in right there. And then we'll do the same thing. We'll put this on and put the backing on it. So I can poke this through the holes I made now, even though I can hardly see the holes in this cork. You can always test it again because there's always room for just a little bit of movement. That was good. And go get some backing and then put the washer on and the tape. Okay, I'm just going to go hammer these and then put some tape on it. Now let's clip around here and sew it up, and we'll be finished this part of it. We can move on to the next pocket. I think the next pocket is the card slots. So for the card slot pockets, we have measurements in the pattern, and I mark all the measurements onto my fabric. Then after, I always start from the bottom. I fold on the first line and I press, and then it comes back this way, right? And I fold on the second line and press. If it helps you to mark the lines on both sides of your fabric, do that. But I just keep alternating back and forth this way. Okay, now I'll give you another tip too, is I've gotten addicted to this thing. And so it helps me measure when I'm pressing, because not only can I see the line that I'm trying to press and make sure the sides are smooth, but I can see the measurement on here saying that, yes, that's right, that's where the first measurement goes. And then I can iron on here. And then when it comes to flipping to the other one, I don't even care anymore if my lines aren't on there, because I can see this on the line and push this up. And I can see it's measured right on the line too. So it makes it a lot easier to press. I don't think I could live without this thing. So I'm going to continue on through pressing this way and that way and this way and that way until I get this whole long piece pressed. And then when it's pressed, I'll show you what to do with it. So we have all our folds pressed in, and I've marked the center line, and I'm just going to sew down this center line right now. And then I'll come back and we'll do the other markings, because you can fit 1, 2, 3, 4 rows of card slots. 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, 4 across this. So it will definitely hold a lot. I don't know if you can see those lines. I did the center line. Now I do the sides and these 2 extras. So I will get 1, 2, 3, 4 times 3. That's 12 card slot pockets. So I'm just going to sew these up. And then I can press down this top edge a 1/2 inch and press up this edge 1/2 inch. And then we sew it on to here. So let's get this 4 lines sewn in first. Okay, all my lines are sewn in. There's the edge ones, and here's the other ones. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 spots. I've pressed the top hem down 1/2 inch and the bottom hem. And if you have a right side and wrong side to your fabric that's not very noticeable, you might want to make sure that you mark on the back that it's the wrong side, because the top of this is a little bit more space than the bottom. So if you get it turned upside down and flip this way and start pressing it, it's going to look exactly the same, except you're going to have less space here. And I kind of like the more space here at the top, because it might be easier to slide a card slot or a card in there. So here is what we're attaching it to. And I've got the center marked on here, and how far down I have to put it. So I'm going to pin this on here and line it up, and then that way I can sew it down. And I'm just going to sew the top row here and the bottom row of stitching, because the side seams here are going to put the bag together, and that will hold down the rest of it. So for now, I'm just going to do the top and the bottom, but I'm going to make sure it's really flat and smooth and lined up and everything. And then this piece will be done. And we can move on to our next zipper pocket. So here we have our card slot pockets all finished. We can put this piece aside. And this is the top where I'm going to put this, which I cut out from the fabric cutting table. And obviously it's not quite right. So I had to draw myself from the pattern piece, the little rounded corners and the center, which I'm going to cut out carefully now. After I get it cut out and the proper shape, then I can sew just around the outside. I've got this little foot, stitch in the ditch foot that can go around the outside nicely. And when I get to the corners, I'm going to slow down and go just one step at a time around the corner, following the corner. And, you know, there's only 4 corners. It doesn't take long to go slow and easy. But anyway, I can proceed with that now. So I'm going to cut this bits off that don't belong and then sew this onto here. So here it is. I've sewed it on. This is our zipper placket or overlay, as some people call it. I put a little strip right in the middle of really skinny double-sided tape to hold it down. And I sewed around with my stitch in the ditch foot, and when I came around the corners here, I did 1 stitch and I turned, and 1 stitch and I turned, oops, and 1 stitch and I turned all the way around the corner, and it makes nice corners that way. This is going to be cut out of the center here, and when we cut it out, we can cut it out. First I cut it the same size as the box, and then I flip it over and trim it back just a little bit, probably up to where my double-sided tape is in the middle, because I want to expose a little bit of this on the other side. But I'll cut it and then I'll show you what it looks like. Now when it comes to the zipper, we have our zipper, and it's clipped on, and this is the right side and this is the right side, and that's the way I'm going to sew it on. The zipper is bigger than the box here, but that doesn't matter. We're going to make sure our pull is in the center when we sew it, and there's going to be some overhanging just for safety's sake. You always need, as big as this box, you need that long of exposed zipper teeth. So first I'm going to sew this zipper onto here, and then I'm going to turn it up a bit and sew this lining onto the zipper. Let me just put it here so I can show you. So that when I sew it, this is going to be the right side and the wrong side of the zipper. And this is going to be the right side of the zipper and the wrong side of this. So I'm going to get these things sewed up, and then I'll come back and show you how it works. Okay, if you're one to want your zipper pulls on a certain side, then think carefully about where you're going to put them right now. I've got this one figured out. This is going to be against my body, the back of the bag lining, so I want my zipper pulls on this side. This is going to go on the front, so I'm happy with the way this is going to be sitting. When it comes to my other pieces, I do want this on the front, so that means this is going to be on the back. Now if this is the back, it faces this way, front and back. So that means I want my zipper pull here or here. Well, actually, if it's against my body, I want my zipper pull on this side. And then we'll match what's inside. Let's get my inside back again, because this is going to be against my body, and this is going to be against my body. So I want the pulls to be here, right here. So that means I want to put this under right here. I mean, if you want to pin it all together and take a good look at it yourself, you can, but this is the way I'm going to put it in. Now, before I do that, I want to show you, I did cut very neatly this little rectangle out, and then I went even farther and cut it halfway out again, because we're going to sew this zipper onto this part only, right here. Right along, edge stitching along here. And then I pressed this so that it would sit nice. So I'm going to sew this on, and then after I'll show you how we put this together. But first I'm going to get some double-sided tape and line this up really nice. Don't need all those threads. Okay, it's sewed on the inside now too. So we did the outside first. Then later on in the steps, we put the sewing around the inside. Now, if you open this up, you'll see this still isn't a pocket because there's no pocket here sewn together. I did clip this out of the way here with pins because I did it in the seam allowance, so that's a possibility for you too. And I did use my stitch in the ditch foot to go around both ways, the top inside and the outside. Now this has to get folded down. I've got double-sided tape on it to hold it up there flat. And it's on here too, so I don't need that anymore. And now I just match these two pieces up. And I trim the bottom off because we don't need that excess. And like with all zipper pockets, we sew around. I'm going to clip here, but I can always use pins in the bottom here. Because the only thing we're sticking together is these two pieces of lining. And again, be careful going over your zipper and your zipper pull. I slide it into the middle here so I don't run over it. And I sew it this way so that I can hold these pieces up as I go around. And I'll probably stitch it and zigzag it. Okay, and then that'll be this piece finished. And you'll have a nice lining inside your pocket. Okay, so I am going to sew that, and then next I think we put D-rings on the back. Next step, let's sew these on. We have to keep our stitching in the seam allowance, and I want this as close to the seam allowance as I can get it. Some people can't get it too close because this gets in the way of their foot, but I do like to have them as close to the seam allowance as I can. So I'm just going to baste these on here, and then we can put everything together with the zipper. So we've got our D-ring tabs sewn on. They're just basted with a little line. When this seam's put together, they will fold back like this, and we'll have them sticking out just a little bit. Now we can put our zipper on, and which way are we going to do it, hey? You have to decide if you want to have this on the front or this on the front. Or maybe you've done a bag with two of these, so it doesn't really matter to you. But decide how you want it to go together. I've already said with mine that I would like this to be the back and this to be the front. And I want the pull on this side because I like it on that side. So to put this on with the pull on this side would bother me. Might not bother everybody, but it bothers me. So I'm going to put the zipper on with the pull on this side. And then it'll match nicely. And then on this side, right in front, it'll be on there too. It'll look good. So I'm going to start with that. Let's just flip this over so we make sure we got it going. I'm going to match up the centers. And look at that, I didn't even mark the center of this one yet. There's my chalk. So let's find the centers here now. I am going to try and avoid using that double-sided tape because my machine is crabby today. So I will line this up with a clip and you shall see if it stays. Now for the first stitch across here, I am just going to sew along the edge because we have to stick the lining layer on too, and that I can sew again. So there's actually 2 rows of stitching holding on the zipper, and the second row I can sew just a little bit more than just on the edge. But first let's clip this on here. Okay, so I'm going to sew across here. I am not going to sew from edge to edge to edge. I am not going to sew in this seam allowance for any reason at all until the bag is finished. It's going to make these tabs pop out a lot easier if we don't sew them down. So everything I do from now on until we're sticking the bag together, I'm not going to sew in this edge. So I'm going to sew from here to there, and probably, you know, maybe 1/8 of an inch here. Not very much. The other thing I have to consider too is, before we get too carried away, you're coming to your last chance to round your corners. You can still round your corners if you want. So I'm going to round my corners off with my pattern piece. I cut everything according to the fabric cutting table, so that's why the corners aren't round. I just measured everything out. So I'm going to cut the rounds into the corners of all the pieces. And so I'll cut the corners and sew this down, and I'll get back to you and show you how we sew on this next piece to this side. But let's do the first one first. So this is sewn on. I didn't do any stitching in the seam allowance. You can see that. I'm going to put the next piece on, and it gets attached to the other side of the zipper. And the centers are matched up again. My center mark, oh, there it is. I thought I lost it for a minute. There's my center mark. Since this side is a bit awkward, I'm going to put a little pin in here. If it's in the seam allowance, it won't do any harm. And then I can clip the rest of it. Like I said, my machine's having a hissy fit today about going anywhere near double-sided tape, so I am not going to waste my time with it today. I'm going to clip across here, and I've got my centers nicely matched. So clipped across, I'm just going to sew the zipper to this other outer layer. Again, I'm not sewing within the 1/2 inch seam allowance here. If you even have to get a pen and measure out your 1/2 inch to remind you not to sew, we're just going to go from the one tab here across to the other tab. We're not sewing in the seam allowance. I'm going to leave those unsewn. So I'm just going to sew across the edge for now, not in the seam allowances. And then after I come back, we can do the lining layers. Oh, and you'll notice I rounded my corners. There, the other one's sewn on now. They're both on the edge. And now I'm going to sew on my lining. So let's flip this over and decide. This is my front. What did I want on my front? I think I wanted this piece on my front. And this is my back. And I think I wanted this piece on my back. So that's where we'll put these. So that's how we'll put these on. I'm going to remove one for now. I like to do it this way so I can see what I'm ending up with. I can plan it out. So I'm going to flip this over to this side and match up my centers again. Maybe I'll use one pin and then the rest can be clips. So it's all clipped up. So if I flip it back, this is how my back's going to look. Like that. Perfect. So I can sew along here with a little bit bigger now than this 1/8 that I had. Sew it a bit closer to the zipper. That way I don't have 2 rows of stitching on top of each other. I am not going to sew past, oh, I've got my lines there still. I'm not going to sew past into my 1/2 inch seam allowance. I am going to sew the tabs down because they're okay, but I'm not sewing past that point. So I'll sew this up and then I'll bring it back and show it to you. And we've got another side sewn on. Our lining is in here. And you'll see again, I hope you can see, I didn't sew past the tabs. And here, I didn't sew past the tabs, although this one came 1 stitch too close, but I didn't sew past the tabs. Now, I'm going to do the other side. I know people top stitch at different times. If you do top stitch, don't go into the sides again. Just, actually, when I do top stitch these, I only go from this line. So it's almost as if this stitching line matches up with this stitching line, like a little box. So I only go as far as this stitching line for top stitching, up to the box here and back again. If I can't go through this zipper pull again, because it's zipper pull. If I can't go through this zipper tab, I don't, which is fine. But if I want to do any top stitching or edge stitching, I make sure I start from here so it looks like it's a continuation. Now let's do this side. And again, I like putting it like this so I can see it. And then I flip it over and I match it up. I always have to have an obvious visual of what I'm doing before I do it. And after I get it clipped on there, I even check it again to make sure, is this really what I want to do? And I know for sure I'm not sewing into the sides. There's a seam allowance there. I don't know if my hand's in the way, but I'll show you after I get it clipped. So there. So again, we're going to have these not stitched. It's all going to be open and flappy on the ends. I'm not going to sew into the sides. And this will be my inside. The backs are in my left hand. And the fronts are in my right hand. And I'm sure that's how I want it, so I'm going to sew this side down now. My first row of stitching, just in case you didn't notice, was that very narrow 1/8. And my second row of stitching, what is that? I don't think that's 1/2 inch. Do I have a little ruler anywhere? Yes. Yeah, it's about 1/4 inch. So the 2 rows of stitching aren't on top of each other, and it's the last row of stitching that really secures everything in there. The first row sort of is just like basting. So I'm going to sew the next one, and I'll bring it back and show you. Now everything is sewn to the zipper. There's my 2 lining pieces, and there's my 2 outer pieces. If you'd like to top stitch, you can. I'm not going to do it this time because my machine is giving me some grief. But if I was going to top stitch, I would press this very carefully down. I might even stick some double-sided tape here to hold it down, but I'd keep the double-sided tape out of my stitching. And I would top stitch from this line to this line here. And that would be it. I wouldn't go here, over here at all. Not even in the tabs, because there's a nice little line here that shows that you can top stitch across here into this line. So I'd just go from here to there. And I do the same on the other side. I'm not going to do it today because machine is being crabby. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put our pieces together. And the way I do that is by folding back the seam allowance and folding back this seam allowance. And hopefully you can see it. But I'm going to clip that together. And even if you have to sew one section at a time, I've done some yellow lines here. I would not sew the tabs here at all. I like to have them long so I can know where they are and I can not sew them. But I would sew as close as I could to here. If you have to make this a 1/4 inch seam allowance because you can't get in there, then do it. It's better to have more space than to sew your tabs. You don't want to sew your tabs. So let's start on this yellow line here as close as we can get and go around up to this section. And we're going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance and do the same on this side with it a little folded over. And there it's squished together. And there it's put together, and then I'm going to get a clip and put it on there too. And it's okay if you do one section at a time. Okay, so just around the bottom and up the top. Maybe I can get this done before I lose my light. Okay, all done. I had one wobbly stitch down here, but in the grand scheme of things, a curve is a curve. Now, this is 1/2 inch, but I'm going to trim it all down, and I'm going to sew another row of stitching here too, right beside, to help reinforce it and crush it down. So that's the next step. Double row of stitching and then trim it all down. There's a double row of stitching and it's trimmed. And did I tell you to open your zipper up? Probably not. But the good news is I like doing 1/2 a side at a time, so it's easy to open the zipper. You can find it, you can see it, you can pull it. It's kind of hard to describe in a pattern, do one side at a time, but I kind of like it. It seems to give me more control. So now, let's do the other side. And when we're doing the other side, did I leave a mark on here? Yes. When we're doing the other side, we don't sew between these two marks. You can do up to the curve, but don't sew in between because we have to turn it. If you like, what you can do is you can start with a 1/2 inch up here, right where your tabs are. See that seam allowance space that we left? Right where the tabs are? We can start up here, but as we come down, you can sew it a little bit wider through here. Aren't I making a mess, eh? Because this will end up being much more of a seam allowance than this narrow one up here. And that's so that your seam is bigger and your lining ends up smaller than your outside bag. And then that way your lining will hang nicer because it's smaller than the outside of your bag. So if you want, draw yourself from 1/2 inch to whatever you like. You know, 3/4 of an inch, 5/8 of an inch. Draw yourself a line to follow, and then you'll get a nice hanging lining. So it's the same thing. Sew part of it, sew the other part of it. You can do a double row of stitching if you think you need it, but with this one, what I'm going to do is trim it down and then zigzag the edges. I'm not going to trim here because I want that big section here to fold in and press with an iron, so I know where the seam allowance is going to continue. So let's get some sewing done. There, and just so you don't think I'm a complete barbarian, I actually drew in a proper wobbly line so that you can see, I forgot this section here, you can see, hopefully, that that's the line I'm going to sew on. So I'm going to sew it once, trim it, and then zigzag it, and not sew or cut trim here. Okay, now I've sewn the lining side, and you can see these aren't really sewn together. It doesn't matter. Neither of these, doesn't matter, because when we turn it, it's what's inside that counts. I am going to go press this open a little bit so I have a line that I can follow when I'm actually sewing it together. The pressing line will show me that this is where the seam is supposed to be. And then I can turn it. And when you're turning it, if you think you're going to stick your arm in here and go like that, you're not. This is a really bulky one. Now I've got this really neat little tool, and I'm going to use it to run through the seams here with the rounded end. And that looks really nice. I'm going to go press this lining along the edges here a little bit to help flatten them down. Okay, I pressed this and I sewed the bottom. And now I can put this inside. And if you can put a little tool in here in the hole, it's hard to see, isn't it? Then you've done a good job of it. You're supposed to have a space on the other side of that tab. This one's not worked out yet. There. There, now my tabs are out nice. Now let's get on to the strap. So we've got our bag done and we've got our materials together for our strap, but let me just show you something first. In this pattern, there are options for different straps. I think there's 5 options, and I sort of have a 6th one in this video. So this is your standard, sorry for all the clanking, this is your standard adjustable strap. This one's made of fabric, and this one's made of cork. They're both exactly the same instructions for both of them. The only thing that's different between the two of them is this is made of strips of 1 inch wide cork, and this is made of strips of 4 inch wide fabric. Now I'll show you how to fold the fabric so that you can get this one done. This one, obviously, you just cut the pieces, and I'll show you how to join the pieces together, because it's almost impossible to find a piece of fabric or a piece of cork or vinyl or whatever raw edge material you're using that is the correct length. So we always have to piece these things together. And there's nothing wrong with that, because at least that way I feel like I can use up some of the little small strips that I have, like these. Because this is a small strip. And I want to be able to use it somewhere, so I'm going to piece it all together and make a strap. So we'll do the piecing too. So I will take this away to start with, and I'll come back with some fabric to show you how to make the strips, and we'll join some cork together. So here we have a fabric 4-fold adjustable strap. This is what we could use, right? My fabric's 4 inches wide. I drew a line down the center, and I brought the edges in to meet, and then I folded it again. So our 4 inches will turn into 1 inch. I'm going to use these 2 pieces, so I don't want to sew them, but if we were going to sew them, I always use my stitch in the ditch foot. I can push my needle to the left, and I can do a real close edge stitch, or I can use my top stitching foot. So those are always really helpful in doing straight lines. You can join fabric straps too. If you have these 2 pieces here, you would put them right sides together. They're ironed now, so they're really bumpy and awkward. But this is how you join them up together. And you would draw a line from one corner to the other corner that's down here. Draw that line, sew on that line, and then cut the extra off. You wouldn't need this extra anymore. And then when you fold it up again, it's going to look like that. And then you can press it into your 4 folds at your ironing board. So I'm going to put these aside now because I want to use these for something else. I'm not going to sew them. But that's a 4-fold, and I'll show you how to actually join these 2, because these do have to be joined together. And it's the same thing. You get these lined up, and draw a line from one corner to the other corner, and then we mark it, and I'm going to clip it. And that's the line I'm going to sew on. And then when you pull it up, it's going to be nice and straight. And then you do the same with any of the pieces you have. So after you've pieced your cork together to make your proper length, the first thing you do is feed one end through your slider, the bar, and I just sewed this one down. Then you come over with that and feed it through your swivel hook. Then you come back and feed it through your slider again. And then you feed it through another swivel hook. And that's the same with the fabric one. I've made my 4-fold fabric piece. I fed it through the bar of my slider, and I sewed it down. Then the other end of it, I fed through a swivel hook, and then I came back and fed it through my slider again, and then I came over and fed it through my other swivel hook. Now the thing you might want to do, just to check, is do the feeding and clip, and feed and clip, and then lie it down flat to make sure that you've got everything on the right side, because you don't want to sew the whole thing and find out this one's facing this way and that one's facing that way, because you might not have something that swivels, or it might not be that easy to fix if you've messed up this one. I always like to see what things look like before I sew them, just to make sure if I'm on the right track, if everything's going well. So always check before you sew. So that was our adjustable strap. There are 2 adjustable straps in the pattern instructions, one for fabric and one for cork. And then there's a webbing strap. And a webbing strap is really easy to do. You measure out your length of webbing. I've provided a pattern piece for you for the strap end here. Put this through your slider, hold on to it, put your webbing in between the two, clip it, and then sew around or put a rivet on, whichever you like. And that is it for the webbing straps. So now let's go on to the hardware heavy one. We already know to make our 4-fold strap lengths, like in the pattern. And we've got our cork all ready to go, like in our pattern. So let's get to feeding through all the hardware. Now I've sewed my strap together and I joined here. And you might notice that I didn't put the two joins on top of each other. If you feel it, you can feel one's here and one's there. And that's because I don't like all this thickness when you have two on top of each other. It's not bad when there's just the one, but two of them I find is just too much to get through some hardware. So I like to spread them apart. So I started with pieces that were exactly the same length, and when I spread them apart, then I end up with extra overhang here, but I leave that on there just in case I need it. And I also cut the other one so there's a bit of an overhang, because actually, truthfully, this overhang was different. So I cut the overhang the same for both of them. And that's because sometimes when you're putting something on, the material is too thick. And I like to have an opportunity to have it a bit thinner at the close. And if I was going to put a rivet here or here, I would sew up and around the end properly. So that's one option, one reason why I like the overhang. The other reason is I like to close it off like this. I'm going to snip my scissors a bit here so it doesn't hang off the page, sort of thing. So that's snipped in a bit so the edges don't hang over. And then when I put this on, I can put it on this way and have a nice not raw edge here with that fold. And that's really helpful if what you're using, like this, is really too thick for what I'm putting it on. Okay, the screw is not screwed up properly, but so I could put this on here, but it would be too floppy on a single width. But if I double it up a bit like this, it makes it a bit thicker. So if you ever have these not fit, you can either put a piece of something heavy like Peltex or something in there and have it make a thicker strap to go through, or you can double up on your strap, either single or double, and then it'll go through there. So I am going to put these together now, but first I'm not finished with, and we already know that the webbing has a strap end on it. Well, this kind of strap I'm making, the heavy hardware one, you can use webbing too with a strap end. So I've got these two pieces already made, and then I'm going to attach this on the other side the same way. Line it up nicely. You can even glue it a little bit if you want, clip it, sew it the same way. Now this isn't in the pattern. In the pattern I stuck to making cork or raw edge with the heavy hardware, but I thought I had some of this webbing left over, so I'm going to use this. So fold it in half. Let's put one of these on. And tuck this in and make sure it's in there really nice. Like I said, you can use glue too. So for this one, you'll need not 2 strap ends and a strip of webbing, but you'll need 4 strap ends, and the webbing is the measurements that's in the pattern. So I'm going to sew these on, and that'll make these finished. Then I can run this through and clip it all, and I'll show you, and it'll complete the strap. But first, let's sew these on. And now we're finishing up. Just like with the webbing strap, we put the strap ends on. If you feel like something really heavy is going to be inside your bag, you can always run some Decovil or some ribbon through here too, so that it's extra support for the cork. So there's my strap ends. On the other side, I stick more strap ends, and I sewed them. Tried to make them exactly the same. And then on this side, this is where we are going to attach our cork piece. And with our cork piece, remember I had the little fold over. I slide one end through my slider. I'm going to stick a clip on it. You can sew it. You can use a rivet or a Chicago screw. And then I'm going to stick another end. See, we've got our slider. Then we go through one of these rings. Then we come through our slider again. And I might need a bit more room, so I'm just going to push it through here. And then we put it through our ring again. I'm going to fold this over. I'll measure it later. I just want to show it to you right now. And let's clip it and we will check it. So here we have our adjustable strap. Even with the other one without the webbing, with just the cork, you'd still have the same, the cork folded over and put through a swivel hook. Then you'd have your cork put through a ring, either one of these cross rings or a rectangle ring or a circle, you know, whatever you have. And then after that, it comes through the other side here that we've made and goes through into the slider. So I'm going to stick my rivets on here and here. But the order that it goes through is slider first, ring, whether it's your swivel hook on an adjustable strap, which is longer, or whether it's a ring or a cross ring, then back through the slider again, then through either a swivel hook if it's an adjustable strap, or a cross ring or a rectangle ring. The instructions are in the pattern, but I just thought I'd show it to you. So how did that go? Make sure you share your makes with us on our Facebook group. And if you have any questions, leave any questions there, or else leave some questions in the comments. I would really like to see what you've made, so please share with us. And thank you for watching. I hope I can see you again soon.